Yeah. Is that something that it sounds like that's something that you really enjoy there, is not just, okay, here's the game and here's the concept, let me compose to that, but more to be involved in the interactivity and to do to work with the complexity of kind of the interactive medium. Is that true? Is that like,
Yeah.
what are the new things that we can throw in there? Like how does that speak to you?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of this intellectual wrestling that I'm doing mentally with, what's interesting to me,
Right.
from the back end perspective, like technically. Also, I have this like really strong desire to learn and to get better at programming. And that at times that gets in the way of actually doing anything productive.
Sure.
Like, right now I am working on this game Paradise Marsh, and I just was kind of messing with this experiment, and realized that, I'm like modulating the sound on the game thread, and it's kind of jittery when you move really quickly. And, let me look into like smoothing this on the audio thread. Like, and then I'm started getting into like pan laws, and I'm spending like just way more time than I want to.
Yeah, in the weeds.
Well, than I want to, but it's actually kind of fun. So
sure.
I have this thing where I, sometimes I get really deep, and then I have to take a step back and think about it and really say, are any of these things that I'm building, or is anybody going to notice the difference? Because if they're not, then is it really worth all the, is it really worth all the labor that you're putting into it? For me, it might just be like an intellectual exercise sometimes, where, I'm gaining some sort of knowledge, but I do try to like take a step back and make sure that I'm making good choices for the project, and I'm not like spinning my tires, doing a bunch of crazy stuff under the hood that at the end of the day just sounds like, a looping piece of music or something.
I feel like you defined what every game engineer I've ever worked with deals with, where they're just
I feel like it's some sort of like universal law of game audio, where it's like, there's like a bar, and that bar is like the dumbest implementation possible. And if people can't tell the difference between that and whatever you're doing, like, you have to really ask that question.
Yeah. That actually extends beyond the game audio as well into basically everything engineering, where you're like, okay, I spent all this time, I made the perfect system. How does it feel different from the player perspective? It doesn't.
You could have just put an image on the screen, and that would have worked. Yep. Maybe.
I mean, I don't know if you ever played The Last of Us 2, but like playing through that game, you start recognizing systems that someone built that is like the most minute detail, and you're like, did they really allow like someone to just go ahead and make a dynamic water system that it would run off like correctly off people's bodies? Like, I barely even notice this now, yet someone spent a lot of time creating this.
I think that's like it's a byproduct of like having a lot of money and a lot of talented people. Just all of the sort of like, I don't know, sort of the hierarchical, it's like cruft or anarchy that kind of happens when you have a really big project like that,
and
where
you're making everybody crunch for like 40 hours extra.
People just they want to they want to be motivated to do it, so I'm going to build this like weird, crazy thing, and just stick it in there. That is really interesting.
Yeah, secretly get away with it. Like, as part of your creative process, in which, especially when it comes to composition, but you can even speak to like the audio design aspects, like what parts are most important to you to maintain control of? Like, what creative processes are most important to you to keep?
Well, one of the things for sure is just having clarity up front about what the relationship is. Mm-hmm. I sort of deal in my personality partially. I think I deal in sort of patterns, like just feeling comfortable, like understanding kind of the nature of something. And so if something's in flux, whether it's a relationship or the identity of a project or something like that, like, it makes it really hard for me to do good work and to feel comfortable, feel confident, all those sorts of things. So that's like the biggest one. I will say that in my experience working on larger projects with more people involved, multiple third parties kind of situation, there's a tendency for people that you haven't met before to influence your work and to have some sort of agency over what you're doing. And I find I struggle with that a lot. I've just accepted that I hate that at this point, because I'm in a position where I don't have to work on those kind of projects if I don't want to. So, and I've had some really bad experiences, primarily in film with those sort of situations where it just was not good for me, like emotionally.
Sure.
It just kind of put me through the ringer. So I've been trying to like work more on my own projects and work on smaller projects, like this Paradise Marsh project. So I like to have, I think at this stage in my career, I'm like more interested in having the space to self-direct as much as possible. I think lately I've been kind of on a bit of a streak where a lot of my musical ideas haven't really worked out with collaborators. So it's been kind of a good opportunity to kind of take a step back and maybe work on some of my own stuff for a while. Because even when people like want to work with you, which is it's a great thing to have, where people like want to work with you specifically. They still have particular ideas. A lot of times they still have something really specific in mind, and it might be something that, is not really in alignment with like where you want to be, what you want to be doing. Obviously every project has like its own sort of intent as like what it wants to be. There's not always agreement on what that is. And sometimes people ask you to do something you already did, or you'd be like this person. I'm like, well, why didn't you just hire them? I don't understand.
So it sounds like people might come and say like, oh, that Disasterpeace fellow, he did an amazing work on Fez. Like, that's the sound we need for our game. And you're like, yeah, but I did that like 10 years ago or whatever.
Yeah. Like it wouldn't be fun for me to just redo that. Like, that's not going to be a good time.
you and your process and where your interests are have evolved beyond that, and they're in a different space now. So like, it's almost, how do you manage here's where I'm at now, and maybe we can do something that will align with where I am now versus, what I did a while ago?
It's a really good question. I think my solution to that has kind of been to not, well, it's not really a solution. I've just kind of left this like void of marketing where I don't really market myself that much.
Sure. And
I might market myself through what I do. And then by the time it comes out and people interact with it, they're reacting to something that's already like, it's already old hat for me. And it's not where I am anymore. I think you can control that to some degree if you're really proactive about how you market what you're doing, what you want to do. But I just don't. It's not a priority for me right now, and it's a lot of work to do that. All the social media or however you do that. It's a lot of time to take away. I set like a really basic goal for myself, which is to like have a mailing list and like push out to that mailing list when stuff happens. And even that is hard for me. Because it just takes a lot of time, and I just want to I kind of just want to make stuff, or I don't want to do anything. It's not realistic at all, but there's like a really big chunk of you really have to communicate to people in order for them to understand what you're doing, and it's a lot of work.